Deep in the hills of Kentucky lies a town shrouded in mystery, Hellier, a place where shadows whisper, caves hide secrets, and a decades-old paranormal riddle lured investigators into a labyrinth of synchronicities, goblins, and occult conspiracies. But one name stands out in this enigma: Dr. David M. Christie. Long before he became the face of Hellier, Greg Newkirk was a folklorist and lifelong skeptic-turned-believer. Raised on campfire tales and the X-Files, he built a career documenting the unexplained, co-founding Planet Weird, and curating the traveling museum of the paranormal and occult with Dana. But in 2016, their lives changed forever. Greg's previous venture, Ghost Hunter Incorporated, was a project in his younger days. Although the group was disbanded, he would occasionally check the email account associated with their website. In mid-2012, paranormal investigator Greg Newkirk received an email from an individual identifying himself as Dr. David Christie. In the message, Christie claimed that he, his wife, and their daughter had recently moved to rural Kentucky, near the West Virginia border, and were experiencing disturbances at their new home. He described encounters with small, goblin-like creatures that peered through windows, attempted to enter the house, and exhibited other unusual behaviors.
For the past 6 months, I have been living in a rural home located on the border of West Virginia and Kentucky, where my family is nightly assaulted by creatures that I have come to believe are of an extraterrestrial origin. These beings appear to be the size and stature of a small child, devoid of any facial features save for large, oily eyes and lip-less mouths. They frighten my children by peering through their bedroom windows, chirping at one another. They actively attempt to enter my home in the middle of the night. Last month, they took my dog. I believe that they are coming from an abandoned mine, located on the edge of my property. Though I am armed, I'm afraid that I'm far too frightened to enter the mine by my lonesome and cannot convince any sympathetic friends to accompany me, though I cannot blame them. I was given your contact information through a man by the name of Terry Christie. When these disturbances first began occurring, I was only inclined to confide in a personal friend who I knew had fringe interests. He offered to share my concerns with a man that had dealt with somewhat similar experiences in previous years. I accepted his offer. Within a week, I was informed that this gentleman had long since retired from pursuits of this kind, but was willing to provide me with contacts who may be willing to help. This is how I came to contact you. I do not have any answer to why, other than a referral and a recommendation from a gentleman I do not know personally. I was under the impression that you would answer that question. Most of Pike County is made up of small towns and rural communities. It is not uncommon to go days without seeing my closest neighbors. I moved to this area for the peace and quiet. I have received neither. I have lived in this area for just under 7 months, and in that time, the majority of the harassment has occurred within the past 3. I did not become aware of any strangeness until early December, although that is only when I began to keep a record of these events. At first, it was merely strange tracks in the snow around my home. I had initially imagined that they were some kind of animal, though it closely resembled a human footprint, minus the heel. At that time, I was under the impression that it was simply a single creature. It wasn't until weeks later that I began to suspect that I was dealing with a number of what I thought were individuals hazing me upon my arrival to the area. In the weeks leading up to this particular evening, I had awoken to find my shed doors open on several occasions, many of my children's toys missing or moved, and my yard in general disarray. The second week of January, I'm having breakfast with my family when my 5-year-old daughter begins talking about the kids without hair. When my wife inquired about these kids, she informed us that she had spent the previous night watching them play in the yard. As you can imagine, this was some concern. I asked my daughter what these kids looked like. She told me they were bald like Grandpa and weren't wearing any clothes. The very same day, I found the wreath that hangs inside our rear porch stuffed into our mailbox. I purchased and installed motion-activated floodlights the following day, and for a time, the problem ceased. It wasn't until the end of February that our daughter informed us that the bald kids had returned. I was awoken to the sound of my daughter screaming. I rushed to her bedroom only to meet her halfway down the hall. When my wife and I were finally able to calm her down enough to speak, she told us that the kids were trying to peer into her window, but they couldn't reach and instead had taken to tapping on it. She hasn't slept in her own bedroom since. Almost every day for the following week, I would find some evidence that something or someone had been on my property the previous night. On Wednesday, the 7th of March, I finally witnessed the kids without hair for myself. The dog woke me up, around 1:30 a.m., scratching at the back door and whimpering to be let out. I noticed that the motion floodlight was on and went to the kitchen window to check that the shed doors were still closed, when I realized I could see the shadow of an individual cast across my lawn. From the angle I was positioned at the window, I could not actually see the source of the shadow or the floodlights. The dog was pacing circles around the back door, and I could hear someone rifling through a box on the porch. Filled with a little more anger than common sense, the only reaction I could muster was to bang loudly on the window and yell, at which point I heard the screen door on the porch swing open and slam against the house. I heard what I can only describe as chirping at this point. It sounded much like a skunk, if more guttural. I then realized that there were more than 2 people on my property, and the shadow, which had been reacting as if it didn't know which way to run, was quickly joined by another. For a moment, I watched as the shadows chirped at one another, when I noticed a figure out of the corner of my eye. Standing in the flower bed, just to the bottom left of my window, was a small humanoid figure with silky pale skin, completely hairless, standing roughly 4 feet. It was looking in the direction of the shadows and had clearly come from around the left side of the house, opposite the porch, and had not noticed me as far as I could tell. Its face was devoid of features, save for large, round eyes, very reminiscent in shape and color of a bird's eye. It had no nose to speak of and only a small slit for a mouth. It didn't appear to move its mouth as it chirped, sounding more as if noises originated from its throat. It was most certainly not a wild animal, and even more certainly not a child. I was too terrified to move, and watched as the creature hopped to the others, and together they scrambled into the woods on the right side of my property. It was clear that there was at least 5 in the group. I have not mentioned this particular incident to my wife. The only other person who I have spoken to about these creatures are yourself and the close friend who introduced me to our mutual friend. Mr. Christie would prefer to keep things that way, and to approach this problem as discreetly as possible. Since that evening, my dog has gone missing from the porch, yet to return. And I can only imagine that this disappearance has to do with these creatures. I've gone looking for him during daylight hours. I wait to find many of my missing belongings scattered at the entrance to an abandoned mine shaft at the far edge of my property. I don't dare go inside. My friend has convinced me that my experience is similar to that of other visitation experiences, providing me with material and references that back up his claims. I am aware of the outlandish nature of what I've told you, but I'm afraid that I have no other explanation for what I have seen, at least at this time. I can see no other option than to seal the entrance to the mine. I cannot achieve this on my own, and I am too frightened to try. I don't dare share this information with others for fear of ruining my career and the reputation of my family. I am prepared to compensate your travel expenses and offer you unrestricted access with whatever recording equipment that you desire, but only on the condition of complete anonymity. Beyond that, I have no desire than to be rid of this problem. Please, inform me of what you would like photographs of and where to send them. Thank you again.
Greg maintained his professional skepticism. Despite his curiosity, he refused to launch an investigation without concrete evidence. But something in the doctor's story caught his attention immediately. the mention of a supposed mutual connection named Terry Wrist. The name struck Greg as odd. He couldn't recall meeting anyone by that name throughout his investigative career. Turning to the internet for answers, his search revealed something far more intriguing than expected. Terry Wrist wasn't a real person at all. The name appeared in 2 books by author Alan Greenfield, The Secret Cipher of the UFO Knots, and The Secret Rituals of the Men in Black. In these works, Greenfield interviews an ex-military figure using this very pseudonym. What makes this connection truly unsettling is the content of these interviews. This Terry Wrist character claimed involvement with a classified unit of Vietnam veterans. Their alleged mission: infiltrating and destroying underground alien bases hidden throughout the southern United States, bases supposedly accessible through cave systems and abandoned mines. While the connection was impossible to ignore, Greg approached it with understandable doubt. His skepticism only intensified when Dr. Christie failed to provide the requested evidence. Yet, as we'll discover later in this series, the name Terry Wrist would mysteriously resurface. Just as Greg was ready to dismiss the entire situation as an elaborate hoax, the case took another turn. After a suspicious silence, Dr. Christie reappeared, with another message landing in Greg's inbox.
My apologies for the time it has taken me to reply to your previous email. The situation at my home had become unbearable, and we chose to stay with my wife's family out of state until an appropriate solution can be reached. I met my wit's end. This afternoon, my brother-in-law and I traveled back to the house for the first time in over a month, as I needed a check from the security of my property and gather some belongings. The house seems relatively untouched, leading me to believe that the creature's motives were driven by the presence of my family, as she requested I brought a camera back to the property for the purpose of photographic evidence. While my home was free of tampering, I was able to find a trail of prints that matched the size and shape of those previously left by the creatures on that property.
Now, what was in that mysterious email that landed in Greg's inbox? Attached were several photographs that immediately caught his attention. Strange footprints captured in mud, unlike anything Greg had ever encountered. Though not an outdoorsman himself, Greg knew when something demanded expert analysis. He quickly forwarded these images to several qualified specialists who might identify the creature that left them behind. But here's where things get truly fascinating. No one, not a single expert, could identify what animal made these prints. Even more compelling was a critical detail that outdoor specialists immediately noticed. These footprints contained dermal ridges. For those of you unfamiliar with forensic terminology, dermal ridges are those fine lines created by skin creases on the bottom of a bare foot, similar to the patterns on your fingertips. Experts consider them as unique as fingerprints. And here's the kicker: they're extremely difficult to fake convincingly. This detail changed everything for Greg. The presence of these authentic-looking dermal ridges suddenly gave Dr. Christie's bizarre story a degree of credibility it previously lacked. What was once dismissible now commanded Greg's complete attention. Without wasting another moment, Greg fired back a response, asking the doctor to place something next to the footprints in the next photograph, something that would provide scale and perspective to these unusual impressions. And sure enough, when Greg checked his inbox the following morning, Dr. Christie had delivered, another message waited for him, containing even more photographic evidence. What did these new images reveal? Just how large were these mysterious prints? And was Greg finally stepping into a rabbit hole deeper than any investigation he'd undertaken before?
The creatures came out the woods late last evening. I have enclosed photographs taken to the best of my ability given the situation. I have also enclosed photographs of the creature's footprints alongside a measuring stick. My brother-in-law is not as skeptical as he was when we arrived, and he will be leaving before dark this evening. I look forward to hearing back from you.
The first set showed more of those unusual footprints, but this time with a ruler placed beside them for scale. What they revealed was fascinating. These impressions measured roughly half the length of a human foot. Each print displayed an identical 3-toed configuration with no heel impression, suggesting whatever left them either walked on its toes or had unusually structured feet. Most tellingly, the tracks clearly belonged to a bipedal creature. There was no evidence of 4-legged movement patterns anywhere in the photographs, but these footprints were merely the prelude to something far more extraordinary. The email contained 3 additional photos, allegedly showing the creatures themselves. The first image was unfortunately too blurry to discern anything meaningful. The second, after some digital enhancement and contrast adjustment, appeared to show what resembled a classic gray alien in profile, complete with an enlarged head, dark eye, and what looked like some kind of facial opening. The third photograph provided the clearest view yet. A humanoid figure, partially visible behind a tree. Its head, neck, shoulder, and portion of its left arm were distinguishable even in the low light conditions. Still, while intriguing, these images remained far from conclusive evidence. Unfortunately, despite numerous attempts to reconnect, Greg never heard from Dr. Christie again. The mysterious doctor simply vanished. But Greg wasn't about to abandon this investigation. Since Christie had mentioned contacting authorities during these incidents, Greg reached out to the state police department serving the area, as Hellier itself was too small for its own police station. They confirmed receiving and investigating a call matching the doctor's description, but refused to share any further details. When Greg tried checking census records for anyone named David Christie in Hellier, he hit another roadblock. The town was so small that no formal census data had ever been recorded. However, when investigating whether the region contained abandoned mines, another key element of Christie's account, government records revealed dozens within a relatively small area. Many properties also featured streams running through them, just as the doctor had described. All these details seemed to support Christie's story, but without more specific information about the property's location, the trail gradually went cold. As weeks turned into months with no further contact, Greg reluctantly shelved the case. Later, that year, Greg and his wife Dana became deeply involved in producing Planet Weird, their documentary web series exploring strange phenomena. During production research, they visited Brown Mountain in North Carolina, famous for its mysterious light phenomena. In a twist of fate completely unrelated to Dr. Christie's case, a colleague casually mentioned knowing a nearby cave rumored to be an entrance to an underground alien base. Intrigued, Greg and Dana explored the location. While they found no alien base, they discovered something peculiar, a massive boulder that appeared oddly out of place, seemingly blocking access to deeper passages within the cave system. This curious finding might have been dismissed as mere coincidence if not for what happened 5 months later, when Greg's inbox chimed with a new message from none other than the enigmatic Terry Wrist. On the 4th of February 2013, the following message appeared in Greg's inbox.
Why did you stop when you were so close? I have something for you 1 week.
When that email arrived from Terry Wrist, Greg's first instinct was skepticism. The timing seemed too convenient. He had just recently shared details about Dr. Christie's messages and the Terry Wrist connection on Weekend Weird, though he'd been careful to remove most identifying information. However, Greg's doubts would soon be challenged. Exactly 7 days later, a follow-up message appeared in his inbox, once again from the mysterious Mr. Wrist, containing information that would dissolve his suspicions entirely.
Hellier was just a symptom. The ink and black are isolated still, and the third order MIA. Bear in mind, for every door closed, the window must be open. The door is closed, the window is open. Use the numbers.
When Greg opened that latest email from Terry Wrist, what he found attached sent chills down his spine. An image showing what appeared to be an old piece of paper with 16 seemingly random numbers written on it. Greg had deliberately withheld the town's name. Only a select few people, those Greg trusted completely, knew this crucial detail. But even that wasn't the most disturbing element of this. Initially, those 16 numbers made little sense to anyone, until one of Greg's friends offered a critical insight. What if they're GPS coordinates? With mounting tension, Greg entered the numbers into Google Maps. As the digital globe rotated and the map zoomed toward its target, his stomach dropped. The coordinates pointed directly to the location of that supposed underground base entrance, the very cave with the mysterious boulder that he and Dana had explored 5 months earlier during their Brown Mountain visit. This revelation was deeply unsettling. Only a handful of people had accompanied them that day, just the camera crew and their colleague who suggested the location. And none of these individuals knew the specifics about the Hellier case. How could this anonymous sender possibly connect these disparate elements? While it's conceivable that all these emails, from Dr. Christie to Terry Wrist, originated from the same person, a troubling question remained. How would this individual have known about Greg's spontaneous trip to Brown Mountain? More specifically, how could they pinpoint the exact location Greg had visited on what was essentially a whim? Something about these communications defied logical explanation. The connections were too precise, the knowledge too specific for mere coincidence or ordinary research. If you're intrigued by this extraordinary case and want to dive deeper into Greg's investigation, I highly recommend watching his comprehensive docuseries titled Hellier, available right here on YouTube. The full series explores these events in much greater detail and follows Greg's team as they unravel this mysterious phenomenon. Before you go, hit that subscribe button if you want to. Until then, stay safe.